Welcome to another Friday workshop. We're looking for engulfing bars here. So let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. Yeah. So we can see, it kind of looks like we're using a hybrid Renko bar here. I can see it actually has a little tail on the top of this one bar. So I don't know. It kind of looks like maybe the indicator smart bars, but it's close enough to our Pro Renko bars. And so what we're doing is we're looking for these, essentially we're looking for these reversal bars. However, Charles is, calling them engulfing bars. And so, I guess they do need to be engulfing bars with this particular bar type, because if you look closely, right, you'll see that they have wicks. Sometimes they'll have wicks on both ends. So let's see, how about right here, like the second reversal, right? The up bar has a small wick on it, and in this case the reversal bar has a slightly taller wick, right? So I think what's needed is we got to make sure that this reversal bar, its high price of the bar is higher than the previous bar in order for it to be a engulfing bar. So we'll look for these engulfing bars, and then the second condition that we're looking for is volume, right? So volume just needs to be greater than the previous bar's volume. So yeah, it looks like this engulfing bar here, this reversal bar here, was not a a signal, I guess, because if we look at the volume essentially looks even or equal. So the volume's not engulfing as well. So that's why this one, I think that's why this one did not work out. And let's see, this one here, I'm not sure why this one didn't work out. The volume is slightly higher than the previous volume, but maybe we need a certain percentage of volume greater. So yeah, so we'll work on this system here. So I guess what's going to be new in this workshop is building the conditions that look for a engulfing bar type. And I'll show you two different ways to do this. The first way, the easy way, is to use NinjaTrader's indicator, and then if that doesn't work out, then we can actually just build it using comparison solvers. All right. So let's get the chart up. Not that one. Let's see, not that one. This one. All right. And all right, so let's see. I need to add volume on here. And let's see, on that chart, let's see, there he's using a colored volume, and let's see, I'm trying to remember the name of that indicator. I know it comes with NinjaTrader. Let's see, is it buy sell volume? Yeah, so let's see. It's actually, in BloodHound, well, I'll just put buy sell on the chart, just so we have the nice colored, but in BloodHound we're just going to use the regular volume indicator, because as you can see, this buy sell volume indicator has two different plots. So it just makes it a little more complex to analyze the volume in BloodHound if you use, a volume indicator that, breaks it into two different plots like this. And strange, I don't have any volume. What's going on? Maybe I need to reload my data. Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. This buy-sell volume is actually working in real time. So this definitely will not work out. So let's remove that one. And yeah, I guess I'll just use the regular volume. Alright, let's move that up. Okay, let's open up BloodHound and give our BloodHound template a name. So I'll just take last week's name and change the date. Alright, there we go. So let's kind of think this through as to what we're actually going to be building in BloodHound. Right, so let's, alright, well, I'll stretch my chart out here a little bit to help out. Alright, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be comparing the high of one bar, and how about if I just slide that over and we'll kind of pretend that this is the current bar. So we're going to be comparing the high of the current bar to the high of one bar back, right? And then we'll be comparing the low of the current bar to the low of one bar back, like so, right? So just to remind you guys, you know, this may not make sense using the Pro Renko bars. You know, it would be much easier just to use the inflection solver. You know, but however, the question was asked, you know, to look for engulfing bars. You know, because remember these bars here act a little differently. They actually have, some of the bars going up actually have wicks. So this bar over here, the second one on the left, has a little wick on it. So who knows? Maybe sometimes those wicks actually get higher than the reversal bar. So that's why we're actually building a little more complex system here, building an engulfing bar condition. Right. All right. So the first comparison solver, I'll look at the high points. Right. I'll compare the high prices. And then I'll need a second comparison solver that's going to compare the low prices. Alright, so we're going to be comparing the low of 0. Actually, I'll kind of write it in NinjaScript. So this is how you would write that in NinjaScript. And we're going to compare it to the low of one bar back. So that's how it looks in programming language. I'm sorry, I said the low. Hold on. There. Change this to the high. Change that to the high price. Okay, there we go. Alright, so to get the high price, we're going to use SI Chameleon. Alright, so let's scroll down to the S's, and there's Chameleon. Right, and simply enough, So let's see. Yep, I'm just going to use the high. So it's already set for me, so that's all I have to do. That's done. And this displacement, so we're going to be comparing the high of the current bar, so we're going to leave the displacement to 1. Now down here in the indicator B, we're going to be also comparing to the high price, so we'll need chameleon again. Alright, and we're going to still comparing it to the high price, so we'll leave that alone. But this time we're going to be comparing it to one bar back, to the previous bar back. So we need to set the displacement to 1, right? Alright, let's see. And I need to take a look at this. I just want to see. Alright, so I'm looking at the wicks of everything that's circled here. So, yeah, so you know what? Maybe, so I'm thinking here that the reason why this reversal here, or this engulfing long bar, is not identified is because you can see the low prices are actually equal to each other. So it's, you know, so that could be considered as not an engulfing. Alright, so the up bar would need to have a tail on it to actually engulf the down bar. So in other words, the bars can't be equal, right? So the low prices can't be equal, and the high prices can't be equal either. We'll just make that assumption, right? So to get a full engulfing, right, we need the highs to be at least 1 tick higher. So let's set this to 1 tick. Alright, and if I just click off real quick. So now if we look at our outputs, right, this upper output here for the long, right, it says A greater than B by 1 tick, right? So yes, so we want the current high price to be greater than the high price 1 bar back by 1 tick, but we don't want them to be equal. So this one down here says A greater than B by 0 ticks. We don't want them to be equal, and we need at least a 1 tick difference. All right, so let's set that to 0. We're going to set that output to 0. And so the same goes down here for the short outputs. Let's set this to 0, like so. All right, and I'm turning this comparison solver off, so that way we can take a look at the output here. So we can see we're getting a long output, right, whenever the high price is higher than the previous high price of the bar. So that's working good. So if we take a look at this, right, this high price is higher than that high price, so we got a long output. So that looks good. However, you know, since this is a reversal down, right, so take note, right, this is our reversal bar right here, so we're actually going to want a short signal, right? We're going to want to take a short. So we don't, you know, but all we have is just a long signal here, right? So we kind of need to either reverse our logic, or an easier way to do this is what we'll do is we'll make a kind of a universal signal here. Let me get back on the correct solver here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this short output to 0, and I'm going to set this other short output here to 1. Alright, so now right? If we look at BloodHound's output, now we have a long and a short signal. And so what I can do is I can use the bar direction, right? I can use our bar direction solver to kind of filter out the long signal here and make this a short only signal, right? So I'll demonstrate that in just a moment. So but let's work on comparing the low prices first. Alright, so we need to change this indicator A section over to the low price. So we'll grab Chameleon again, right? Put Chameleon in there, and we'll select the low price here, the low bounds, and do the same thing in indicator B. So, alright, select Chameleon, select the low price, and we just need to remember to set our displacement to 1, so this is looking at 1 bar back. And so in this case, alright, so for this solver, what are we looking for here? We want something like this, actually. Let me slide this back over. There we go. Right, so we want this low price to be lower, right, than 1 bar back, like so. And so I can see that my short output is detecting, right, when the low price is lower than the previous bar's low. So I know that the short output actually has to set the correct settings here, like so. And let's not forget that we need at least a 1 tick difference between the low prices, so I'm going to set that to 1. Right, and on my computer I need to click on another solver and come back, and that updates the description here, right? So we have A is less than B by 1 tick. So in other words, the low, A is the low of the current bar, needs to be less than B, and B is the low of the previous bar. So I'm going to set this to 0 because we don't want 0 ticks. We need 1 tick difference. And also I'm going to set this long output to 0, and I'm going to match this long output. I'm going to match it with the short output. And so now, as we look at our chart, we can see, right here, this bar is marked, and we can see that as the lows get lower, they're all we're getting an output from that solver as the lows get lower. All right, so those are kind of the so those are the 2 primary conditions. And interesting enough, look, as I have both of these solvers turned on now, and so now look, we can see that all of these reversal bars are being marked, right? Because all of these reversal bars are engulfing bars, at least with the Pro Ranko they're always going to be, and we can see they're being marked now. So, however, we can see they're not really being marked as a buy or a sell only, right? If we look down here at BloodHound's output, right, we're getting a long signal and a short signal, so we need a way to kind of clean this up so that we get one or the other, right? We don't want both a long and a short. We want a long or a short. So the next step here is we'll clean up the signal. So let's move over to the logic board to do that part. Alright, so I'm going to create a new logic board, and Alright, so we'll just call this engulfing bars. And we'll drop our solvers that we built, our existing solvers on the board here. Drop the other one on here. And we need both of these conditions to happen at the same time. So, alright. So there we go. As we look at our chart, right, we can see that all the engulfing bars are marked. So, okay, so next step is we want to get it a long or a short, one or the other, not both. So we're going to use the bar direction solver to do that. And so, right, if we take a look at this bar direction solver, right, we can see that on this down bar we're getting just a short output only, and on this reversal bar up we're getting, right, on these up bars we're getting a long only out. So as we plug that in, presto, now we can see our signals are nice and clean now, like so. So that essentially it. That's it. See, I can also change the name on this AND node to engulfing, and that what that'll do is that helps remind you, you know, when you come back to this, you know, like a month later, you look at this AND node and it's got a name on it, and it helps you remember what, you know, what is all this logic doing? What's it all doing for me? You know, because I quite literally named these two comparison solvers. You know, I named them literally as what they're doing individually. You know, but when you put them all together, then it actually does something different. It looks for an engulfing condition. So it's kind of helpful to name your logic nodes to tell you what all the solvers are doing together. Alright, so the next step is let's look for the volume. Let's look for right, the engulfing volume. I guess we'll call the volume engulfing. So once again, we need another comparison solver. So let's just add a new one on here. And we're essentially doing the same type of comparison as we did with the highs and well, just the highs, not the lows. Yes. So we're going to be comparing the volume of the current bar, which is in NinjaScript is bar 0, and we're going to be comparing that to the volume of one bar back. So I'll name it like so. And next step I need to do is change this over to the volume. There is a little shortcut here. There is a volume here, but if you notice, there's no displacement anymore, right? The displacement function disappears. So I'm just gonna leave this on the indicator and just go change my SMA to the volume indicator. There's really nothing to do with the volume indicator, right? There's only one plot out, so we just leave it alone. And come down and change this one to the volume indicator. Like so. And remember, so this one needs to be looking at the volume one bar back. So we're going to change our displacement to 1 here. Alright. And so our long outputs, so yeah, you can see the label did not update on my machine, so I'm just going to click off and then click back on the solver, and now we can see, oh, that's right, it didn't change because I didn't change the difference values. So with an indicator, if your indicator that you're looking at, if it's not working on the price panel, then you're not going to want to use ticks, right? So if your indicator is down below on a sub panel down below, really you're going to want to change this from ticks to points, right? That you're going to want to use points. And so let's say we want our volume. Let's see, this is oil. So let's see, if we're looking at our volume that's on the chart right now, let's see, it's going up above 600. So let's say we want a volume, we want the volume to be at least, 50 volumes greater. So I'm going to set this to 50. And so now the display should update, but I'm just going to click off and click back on. And now you can see the description updated, right? So we have A greater than B by 50 points, or 50 volumes. And we have A greater than B by 0 ticks. And we don't want that 0 ticks. We need it to be by 50 points or greater. And so let's do the same with the shorts. Turn that off. And so let's look at our output from this solver. So we can see whenever we're getting a long output, that's when the volume is rising, is getting greater and greater. And whenever the volume, right, is stepping down, so like right here, the volume got less and we're getting a short output. So it's telling me that we actually don't want this condition, right? We're kind of looking for these. We're looking for the condition where the long output is, where the volume's getting greater, right? So clearly on this bar, the volume is greater than the previous bar, so that's what we're looking for. And we're going to want to set the short output to the same condition as the long output. So let's set this to 1. There we go. All right, so now we have kind of once again, we have a long and a short output, identifying when the volume gets greater. So now let's take a look at our engulfing condition. And let's see. So far, if I'm looking at the volume, and I can see that so far the volume is always greater than the previous bar. So let's see if we can find a case where that's not true. It's probably going to be hard to do. At least with the pro rank goes, that's going to be pretty difficult to do. Alright, yeah, I don't think I'm really going to find something where the volume is 50 or greater, but what I'll do is I'll use this as an example here. And I'm going to have to change my requirements here on looking at this volume. Right, so I'm going to change this. Instead of needing 50 volumes greater, I'm going to require 100 volumes or greater. And when I did that, you'll notice that, right, this bar is not marked anymore, right? This engulfing bar is no longer marked when I did that. And that's because this volume is not, let's see, this, yeah, so the volume of this bar is essentially, it's 301, and the previous bar back is 222. So Alright, so here's our engulfing signals. We're looking at our engulfing signals. And so when we add in our volume requirement, so the volume needs to be 100 volume greater than the previous bar. As I connect that in, bingo, you see I got rid of this engulfing bar signal here because the volume condition didn't match up. Alright, so let's see. This probably would work better on a different bar. So let's see, let's find a different bar type. Well, I guess a minute bar will be just fine. 5-minute bars, we'll change that over. Alright, so there we go. So I'll just say that I know for any of you candlestick pattern enthusiasts out there, technically this is not a true engulfing condition. Let me kind of point out why. So, right here, the body needs to be engulfing, and so the body of this bar is not engulfing the body of the previous bar. So a true engulfing state requires the bodies to be bigger. But it looks like on Charles has a special special type of candle bar here. So it looks like the body's always going to be engulfing, and he's just more concerned about the wicks. So. Alright, so that's one way to do this. So there's another easier way to look for engulfing situations. So let's take a look at that. And here, let's see. Let's put the indicator on the chart first, I guess. So NinjaTrader has a candlestick pattern indicator. Right, and let's see. So we have a bullish engulfing, right? And I'm just going to set the trend strength down to 1. Right, and you'll notice that it has this plot output of pattern found, and you'll notice it's set to transparent, so it doesn't actually show on the chart, right? So let's take a look. If we apply this, and if I set this color to white and hit apply, you notice how price just kind of disappears, right? So price just got shrunk all the way up here, and this white line down here is from the candlestick pattern indicator, right? That's this pattern found down here. So we don't, so we're just going to leave this to transparent, but since it has this plot, we can use this plot inside of BloodHound. Alright, so put that back to normal. Okay, so we have one indicator that's looking for bullish engulfing, and we need a second indicator. Add that on here to look for bearish. Let's look for a bearish engulfing, and once again I'm just going to set the trend strength to 1 just so it finds more of them, and click OK. And oh good, right here we found one. Okay. Alright, so the way we can use NinjaTrader's indicator inside of BloodHound is we're going to use the threshold solver. Alright, so let me drop a new threshold solver on here. There we go. Let's connect this guy up. Alright, so that's a bullish. So let's look for the bullish first. Bullish engulfing. Alright, I'll just abbreviate the name. And we'll set our indicator to the candlestick pattern indicator. There we go. Alright, so I just need to set the indicator up correctly. So we're looking for bullish engulfing, and remember I set my strength down to 1, and so here we go. So this indicator only has one plot, so that's all selected for us. That's good. And essentially what that plot does is it goes from 0 to 1. So when the indicator finds the pattern that you're looking for, that plot sets itself to a value of 1. So if let's say that's bullish, so if I just set this at A or greater to 1, we're going to get marked with a long output for a bullish engulfing, like so. And alright, let me scroll through here and see if we can find a bearish engulfing. A bunch of bullish. Here we go, there's a bearish one. Alright, so if we're going to look for those bearish engulfing, we'll just grab another threshold solver. And let's change the name here. Alright. Change our indicator over. And set it to bearish engulfing. Let's see, there we go. Once again, I'm going to change the trend strength down to 1. Alright, patterns found, that's all good, leave that alone. And since this is a bearish engulfing, we're going to want to use the short output this time. Set that to 1. And there we go. Not a lot of bearish ones on this chart, but there's 2 more. Okay. So now if we want to, see both the bullish and bearish together, we just need to connect them together with an OR node. And alright, so now let's take a look at the chart. So there we go. There is our candlestick patterns. Well, alright, so now let's implement the volume requirement. So look at this right here. Right, we can see the volume is far less than the previous bar's volume. So let's expand this out here. And where did it go? Here we go. So this bullish engulfing, the volume is quite a bit less, right? So if we want to implement our, use our volume requirement, we just need to grab an AND node, connect our volume into the AND node, connect the OR node in, and there we go. So now there's no signal there, right? And this one worked out okay. And I got rid of this bearish engulfing here because of the volume requirement wasn't met. So you look at the crosshairs there. And look at this. So this bullish, look at this bullish. We do have an output from BloodHound, but it wasn't enough to generate a signal. Let's take a look. Yeah, so if we look at the flags here, right? So BloodHound's output was essentially 0.54. So it wasn't enough to generate an actual buy signal, and that's probably because the volume requirement wasn't quite met. So we can see the volume is at 229, and if we look at the volume one bar back, yeah, the volume was 175. So that's a volume difference of 54 in the volume, but we're looking for a volume difference of 100. So that's why BloodHound's output didn't quite give us a signal. The volume was greater, but it wasn't 100 volumes greater. So we didn't actually get a signal, but we did get an output from BloodHound. Another bullish here. Didn't quite get triggered. That volume didn't work with us on that one. So, all right. I think that'll do it for this question. And let's see. So next, what I had is it's going to demonstrate using the toggle node. So I had this question come in, and I thought it would be a good revisit of using the toggle node. So let's see. Let's focus on this setup over here on the right side. So we're waiting. So this trade setup requires two conditions, right? So the first state is these moving averages need to cross over each other, right? So we need to kind of have, you know, the faster moving average below the slower moving average before we take any short trades. And then we're waiting for a pullback. We're waiting for a pullback. So when you're using the Renko bars like this condition is really simple to do. So when we get this crossover, what we're going to do is we're going to use the toggle node and turn the toggle node on to hold on to the short state until we get this pullback. And when we get this pullback, we'll get the signal and then turn the toggle node off. Alright, so I need to change my chart back to the Pro Renko. And let's see, I think 5-1 will probably work just fine. Alright, so I already have those moving averages set up on my chart. So as we look at this, right, these moving averages are actually trigger lines from Nexgen. From Nexgen. And essentially I kind of came up with something similar on my chart. So I'm using a linear regression and then taking the smoothing of that linear regression. So let's see, let me open up the dashed one here and show you how I built that. So you can see the solid line is just the linear regression 80. Right, so the solid line is the linear regression 80. The dashed line is the EMA of the linear regression. Right, so you can see up here in the input series, I'm feeding the linear regression into the EMA to smooth out the linear regression. and it's just a simple 20 period smoothing, right? So so we have a linear regression, and then we have an EMA smoothing of the same linear regression to get a slightly slower moving average. So let's see, first step, let's look for this crossover condition here, right? So we can see we have a cross up condition here, and we have this cross down condition here. And let's see, I'll start with a new logic tab here. So let's see. Alright, so we'll call this like a trigger line pullback. So that's typically what these moving averages are called. They're called pullback, or they're called trigger lines. I'm sorry, they're called trigger lines. So that's the term that Nexgen uses on these, are trigger lines. And so we're going to look for a pullback onto the trigger lines. So we're looking for a crossover. And let's see if I can find two crossovers real close to each other. Oh, there we go. Good deal. So we have a bunch of crossovers happening right here on this section of the chart. Alright, so the faster moving average is just the linear regression. So we're going to set the linear regression into indicator A. And first, let me give this a name, right? So I'll just set this to the linear regression, and we're going to use an 80 period. Right, only one plot, nothing to set here. And down here, so an indicator B needs to be our slower moving average, right? So it's going to be the EMA of the linear regression. So we're going to need the EMA first. So we're going to add the EMA on here. Change that to the EMA. And next we need to feed the linear regression into, so I'm going to nest the linear regression into the EMA here, right? And remember, our EMA, it's a 20 period for the EMA, and the linear regression is an 80 period. So let's change this to 80. So there we go. All right, so if we look at how this reads here, it's the linear regression 80 fed into the EMA 20. So there's that, and bingo. And as we look in our chart, we can see all those crossovers are marked now. And all right, so let's take a look at this long crossover up, right? And so here's kind of our first pullback, and so we can see from here, right? We're essentially in kind of a long condition, long state, based on the trigger lines crossing each other. So let's start looking at the toggle node. Alright, so here's how we need to set the toggle node. So when we get a signal coming in, so in other words, take a look at this. So when we get this long signal coming in, we want to turn essentially the long state on. We want to toggle the long side on. And if an opposite signal comes in, right, so that if a short signal comes in, which would be right opposite of the long, then we want to turn the long state off, like so. Right? So let's take a look at the toggle node now. Right? So now you can see this looks a lot like if we just used a comparison solver. Right? So whenever the faster moving average is above the slower one, the dashed line, right, we can see we have a long output. We're in a long state. And right, vice versa, when the faster moving average is below the dashed line, the slower moving average, we're in a short state, like so. So, you know, essentially this toggle node kind of created a comparison solver, right? And we could do the same thing with a comparison solver, and it would only take one node. But you'll notice that with the toggle node, it has a reset function, so we can actually turn the states off. And so that's why we're going to be using the toggle node. Is as soon as we get to this pullback state, we're going to turn the toggle node off. So we're no longer like in an uptrend state. So this will make sense here in just a moment. All right, so let's going to build the condition for these pullbacks. And since this is using wrinkle bars, this is going to be really easy to do. We're just going to use the inflection solver. Right, so we're just going to look at the closing price and see when the closing price inflects or reverses. Right, there we go. So we can see every time price reverses, we get a signal. So in this case, this first pullback, right, we can see as soon as price reverses, we're getting a long signal out here. And let's stretch this out a little bit, make that a little easier to see. Right. So remember, this arrow here is identifying when our long, our long trade, condition sets up. So we're kind of in a long, looking for a long trade setup, and then on this reversal bar here it essentially identifies our first pullback here, right? And we get a long signal out of it. So let's see, what do you think is going to happen if we join these together with an AND node? Connect that in, connect the inflection in, and there we go. So, all right, so we get a nice pullback and a long signal out of it. And of course we get another long signal out of it. And so on and so forth, as long as our moving averages don't cross each other. So let's keep scrolling along, and now we can see that let me grab an arrow here. Now we can see our moving averages crossed each other, and so now we're in this short state right here, right? However, going back to this, let's say you may only want to take this first pullback trade, right? So you don't want to take the second pullback or this third or fourth. You just want to take the first one, right? I think typically the first pullbacks are usually the most reliable. So what we're going to do is on our toggle node, So as we take a look at our toggle node, what we want to do is we want to turn this long state off after we get our first pullback. So we can use this reset function, right? So if we get a signal coming in, we can turn the long state off, or if we get an opposite signal, actually no, let's see. And so if we look at this inflection solver, we can see we're getting a short signal down. So the short signal right is opposite of the toggle state. So if we look at the toggle state, right, it's long. So we actually don't want to use this on opposite signal to reset the state. Right, we don't want to do that because of this short bar down. Right, so this short bar down would reset the toggle node too soon. So let's take a look at the toggle node, and so let's connect this inflection solver into the reset. And so let's take a look. Right, so we get our cross up, we're in a long state, and then the inflection solver gives us a long output, and look, it turned off, right, the toggle node turned off one bar too soon. Turned off one bar too soon. So we need to delay that signal. So we're going to use this look back to delay the signal. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so now look at this. Our long signal, instead of it being on the first reversal bar, it got shifted forward one bar. Look, it's one bar over now. Alright, so let's look at the inflection solver directly. Right? So there's our long signal with the green arrow, and after the look back, right, the long signal got shifted forward one bar, or, got delayed one bar. So let's take a look at the toggle node again, and now we'll take this look back, connect it into the reset, and there we go. So now look at this. So now the toggle node is on until we actually get the reversal bar up. So now if we take a look at this, so let me pull the chart forward. So now look, now we only get the first pullback in the trend, and there's no more long signals, right, during the uptrend. And now let's take a look at the downtrend. What's going on here? Yeah, now I would expect to see a short signal either there or a short signal here. One of these two pullbacks, right? Because yeah, so this one, probably this one, because this looks like it's happening after the crossover. So let's kind of analyze this and see what's going on here. Okay, so now this is kind of becoming a lesson in how to debug your system here. So first, I'm going to look at the crossover of the trigger lines. Okay, so good. Right there, yep, we got our crossover down, so we got our signal. And let's take a look at the toggle state and see what's going on here. And so the toggle node is just, it got turned off for some reason. Alright, let's disconnect or reset here. And okay, so there we go. Oh, so look at this. So look what happened here. So we got a really special case. So right, we can see we have this down signal right here, this short output from our look back, and if we look at our crossover, look, our crossover is on the same bar. So that's what happened, is the toggle node actually got turned off on the same bar that it got turned on, and it killed everything. So look at that, we found a little hiccup in this set of logic. So we need a way to compensate for that. Alright, so what do we do when our crossover, right, so we got our crossover signal when it happens on the same time that we get our reset signal. Our reset signal resets on the same bar as the crossover. So we needed a way to kind of negate our reset signal here. And so I think I have a simple solution. Let's test this out. So let's use the XOR node. Alright, so if we look at the XOR node, actually here I'll just look at, let's take a look at the inflections here. So with an XOR node, if all we have is one signal coming in, right, essentially all these signals just pass right through. Right, all these signals are just passing right through. So all of these, right, all these inflection signals are just passing right through. And keep in mind, we're looking at the inflection signals that are delayed by one bar. So that's why they're one bar behind. Now, so we're interested, keep in mind, we're interested in this one bar here. So let's just focus on this one bar, this one bar with the arrow. Now, so that's looking at the XOR. So keep in mind our crossover solver, right? It's got a signal on that same bar. So now look what happens if I plug it into the XOR. You see how this signal disappeared? Let me disconnect that again. Right? So we got a long, a short, a long, and a short signal coming in here. We have 4 coming in, and as soon as I connect the crossover signal, only this one short signal disappeared. And that's because going into the XOR, coming into the XOR, I have, right, 2 connections coming into the XOR, and I have 2 long short signals coming into the XOR. And so the XOR actually negates that signal. So yeah, I guess I'll just kind of keep it in simple terms there, just like that. And so now let's take this guy. We're logic's getting a little more complex here. And alright, so let's take a look at the toggle node. Alright, so we got our moving averages crossed each other, so we're in a short state here. And so now if we take our signals from the XOR into the reset, alright, so now our toggle node is staying on at least for 3 bars until we actually get our pullback. So, you know, we got a little bit of chop right here, so we got like a 1 bar pullback right after the crossover and then a down state. And so now if we take a look at the full signal here, like so, and oh, look at this. So now we lost our long signal. Let's see what's going on there. Oh, look at this craziness. Look what's coming out of the XOR. Oh my god. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so that logic didn't work either. So, yeah, shoot, that logic didn't work either. Okay. So good. We'll keep on troubleshooting here. So this logic did not work, right? Because our crossover solver, right? We get a long signal here on this bar, and if we look at the look back signal, right? There's no hold on. Let me mark this bar here. There we go. So that's the bar we're looking at in question. So if we take a look at the look back, yeah, see, the look back does not have a signal here. And so therefore the XOR pushed the signal through, and of course it reset our toggle node, you know, turned our toggle node off as soon, yeah, turned the toggle node off as soon as the crossover happened. So, yeah. Alright, so this logic's not working either. Let's, alright, let's rethink this. Well, so just keep in mind, remember, that was my original premise, was just to kind of to show you how the toggle node works and how you can turn the toggle node on and off. But in this exact situation here, let's see, yeah, I'm not going to use the toggle node. Actually, I'm not going to use the crossover or the toggle node. Yeah, how about if I take these guys out of this situation, out of the equation, and let's approach this using the comparison solver. Alright, so let's name this solver. And I'm just going to set this solver, this comparison solver, up real quick to compare our trigger lines. Alright, so I'm going to put the linear regression 80 in indicator B. and I'm sorry, indicator A, and then in indicator B, that's going to be our slower moving average, so it's going to be the EMA of the linear regression. So let's change our EMA to a 20 period, like so, and let's nest the linear regression into the EMA, and set our linear regression to an 80 period. Alright. Alright, so we can see that the comparison solver, right, is showing us when we're kind of in a short state or a long state. Right, and it looks exactly the way it did when we were using the toggle node. Right, so we're in a long state here, and then we switch over to a short state here. And yeah, all right, so to make this a little simpler, right, let's connect these two AND nodes together, like so. Alright, so there's kind of all of our pullbacks when we're in this long state. But, you know, let's say we only want to take the first signal again, right? So we'll take a little simpler approach, and we'll just use the signal blocker. Right, let's use the signal blocker. Now, I can see as I'm looking at this long trend here, you know, we have quite a lot of bars, quite a number of bars going here. So for the signal blocker, I'm going to set my reset after. I'm going to set this to 200 bars. So we're going to block for at least 200 bars, and hopefully that's enough. If it's not, we can set it higher. And so we're blocking for 200 bars. Now what we need to do is go through all these various, you know, reset conditions here, and there's some of them that we don't need. So for example, this no signal, let's turn this off. And all right, yeah, that's all we needed. Was just to turn the input no signal, turn that off. So now let's expand the chart. Great. So there's our first long signal. There's our first short signal. And let's see, I guess, yeah, interesting. During all this chop, we just never got a pullback in it. So that was good. And yeah, so look here. We start a short state, and we get our first pullback. And right, we start a long state, and we get our first pullback. So that's working pretty good. All right, let's say we want to modify this, and let's say we want to see 2 pullbacks. You know, maybe we're interested in trading 2 pullbacks, not just one, but we'll let the second pullback go through as well, and we'll block the rest. So let's see. All right, let's see. How can we? So let me think about this for just a moment. And yeah, so what we're going to need to use is the reset function on the signal blocker. So let's scroll in here, right? So the signal blocker has a reset as well. So I'm thinking I'll use the signal counter in combination with the signal blocker. And let's see. So I want the signal blocker, essentially I want the signal blocker to count up to the second pullback signal. And yeah, and then essentially not, well, let's see. Nope, let me rethink this here. Okay, so I'm just going to start and set up some initial settings on our signal counter. Alright, so let's see, counting up to, so we want to count up to 2 signals here. And our look back period, so what the look back period does is, you know, when you're counting conditions, you know, you have to say, you know, how far back am I going to look for this number of conditions to occurred. You know, you don't want to look back indefinitely, you know, because then you're always gonna find, you know, at least 2 conditions if you look back indefinitely through the whole history of the chart. So we have to set some kind of limitation. So you know, how about if I just set 50 bars? I'll just start with 50 bars. That's probably good enough. And yeah. All right. So let me explain what's going on here. So I'm going to mark this void area, right? So that you can see there's no output here, right? And so this AND node, right, is what's being fed into the signal blocker. And so if we look at the square area, right, so yeah, so this square area, we can see we got signal 1 coming in, and then as soon as we get our second long signal, we can see that's when the signal counter actually turns off. Right there. So you notice how it lines up with this marker I placed on this second reversal? Right. So this long signal is our first pullback, and this one's our second pullback, right, after we're in a long state here. So I'm actually going to increment or count up to, I'm going to increment that 1 extra. And yeah, and I'm incrementing this up because I'm kind of using the signal blocker in a roundabout way. I'm not using it in its normal state. So let's see. If I use it in its normal state, let me set it back to 2. What's going to happen is that this first pullback actually gets ignored, and the second pullback is the one that we get signaled on. So let me show you here. Well, okay. So if we look at our signal blocker, right, we're back to only seeing the first signal. Now, if I put the signal blocker in here, So look, now we only see the second signal. But we want to see the first and the second signal. So, yeah, there's a couple of ways we can do this. I'm looking over here, we got a short analog signal at the same time. So, let's see what's going on here. Oh, yes, of course. Kind of need to clean up the signal counter a little bit here. Yeah. So I'm going to use an AND node to clean up the signal counter. Okay. So essentially we're looking at the signal counter, right? So coming out of this AND node, we're looking at the signal counter. Now, remember, we have this comparison solver here that's telling us, you know, are we in a long state or in a short state? So if I connect this into the AND node, like so, and there, see, that kind of cleaned up what's coming out of the signal counter here. So it kind of cleaned up getting a long and a short state at the same time. Alright. So let me step back here. So I'm going to step back and explain what we have again. So with the signal blocker, we can see that we're getting the first pullback, right? We're getting the first pullback shown during the whole trend. Right, so on this downtrend, there's no more short signals on this downtrend. However, if we want to see the second signal, right, if I plug this into the signal blocker, now we can see the second signal is shown here, right? So here's the second signal. There's our first long signal, and here's our second long signal. So I'll mark these a little better with 2 arrows. So there we go. The double arrows tells us that that's the second signal here, right? So we can see that essentially we need another signal blocker here. So let's connect that back in. Oh, hold on. Disconnect that. Disconnect that. There we go. So what I need to do is I need another signal blocker here. So let's throw another signal blocker right there. And I'm going to set these 2 signal blockers up the same way. And let's okay. And you can name these signal blockers as well. So this is the first signal. Right? So remember, this signal blocker is essentially, it's allowing through the first signal. Right? There's signal 1, the first signal. Here's the second signal. And this signal blocker, it's going to allow through the second signal. Now, I just need to make sure that both of these signal blockers are set up the same. So I'm going to look through my reset section, and I remember I turned off this no signal, input no signal, and I set the bars to 200. So let's take a look at this signal blocker. So I need to set this to 200, and I need to turn the input no signal off. Let's turn that off, and let's take a look at this. Take a look at this now. Alright, so that's what we want to see. So now we only see the second signal coming through. So now if we want to see both the first and the second pullback, now we can just join them together with an OR node. Let's connect this OR node in like so. Right, so there's our first pullbacks being shown. Connect this other one into the OR node, and now we get our first and our second one shown. Alright, so alright, so let's see, that question was I think that came in from a SIF, if I remember correctly. So let's see. So I'm just gonna yeah, it's kind of interesting how this lesson kind of transitioned from the toggle node into kind of showing you guys the signal counter and the signal blocker. So it's actually a little better than I expected. So I got to show you guys multiple processes there, but hopefully more importantly, you guys kind of get the idea of, you know, don't be afraid to try and get it all right the first time, right? You know, I kind of went through this whole process of, you know, taking one idea, thinking, yeah, you know, this one idea ought to work, and then discovering that, you know, we had a couple of special quirky cases over here on this short side where we have a bunch of chop, and so my toggle node idea didn't actually work out because we had all this chop. And so, you know, I found another way to essentially build the same, you know, the same signals, you know, to build what I wanted, but I just used a different process. I used, right, the signal blocker and the signal counter to do that. And instead of using the crossover solver, I ended up using the comparison solver, right? So, you know, I kind of went through this, you know, testing phase. You know, I went through and just kind of tested one idea, you know, and just tested all these different ideas until I came up with the one that works. So don't ever think you're going to get it right the first time. You know, another valuable tool is this toolbar. And you can see this toolbar here is very valuable because it allows me to mark the chart, so I know where, you know, so I know what certain solvers are, what you know, outputs are coming out of certain solvers. You know, so I use like these long arrows here to tell me when the state changes. You know, I could obviously just, you know, look at the moving average and know that, but you know, so this toolbar is very helpful when you're putting together a system. All right, so there we go. And let's see. And let's rename my OR node here. So I'll just name it to both. Actually, in this case, it'll be the first and second signal there. And I'll just clean the leaders up a little bit. There we go. Andrea's question here. So Andrea piped in a question when we first started up here. So Andrea would like to create a template that uses the Chaikin Money Flow, the MFI, the CCI, the MACD, and the stochastics. And she'd like to see it, let's see, on a 2-minute and a 10-minute time frame. So, alright, so let's see, I'll need to set my chart up for this, and I'm just seeing if there's any other comments in here from Andreas. Let's see. Okay, I don't see any other comments. So let's get going here. All right. First, let's clear up the chart there. Let's clear that out. Shrink the volume. All right. I'm going to need to add a bunch of indicators on here to get this working. So just give me a moment to get these indicators set up. I'm just going to do this without talking here, just to get this done quickly. Alright, there's the money flow. Let's see, MFI. Alright, CCI. Okay, the MACD. And last one is the stochastics. Alright, stochastics is going to be 3 and 14. Okay. Alright, so we have a lot going on. A lot of indicators here in this system on this chart. Alright, so I'm just going to start building each let's see, each indicator one at a time. Let's see. Alright, so so Andreas, actually before I can get going, I need a bunch of answers from you. So I didn't ask these earlier because I wasn't, I wasn't familiar with a couple of these indicators off the top of my head. So let's see, we have the money flow. What are we going to do with the money flow? I need to know, what are we looking at on the money flow? Are we just looking for it to be pointing up or down? Does it need to be above the zero line or below the zero line? What are we doing with that? Also, the MFI. How are we using the MFI? What conditions are we looking for the MFI? Let's see, the CCI. You told me you want it. Okay, so we know what we're doing with the CCI. We're looking for above 100 or below negative 100. The MACD needs to be above or below the zero line. And then the stochastics. What are we doing with the stochastics? We're just looking for the stochastic to be pointed up. Does it need to be above 80, below 20, or something like that? Right? So I need to know, how are you using the stochastics? So I want you take your time and write out the answer to me. How we're using all these indicators. And while you're doing that, I'll work on the CCI. I know what to do with the CCI, and you told me what to do with the MACD, so I'll work on those two. All right. And actually on the MACD, let's see, I'm going to turn the difference off. We're not using the difference. It's set to transparent. Yeah, the average is off. Okay. Okay, there, I set the colors up, so all these indicators should be a little easier for you guys to see. And alright, so to give this template a name, let's see. Essentially, I guess I'm just going to name this template with all the indicators that we're using here. So I don't know what to name this system otherwise. And Stochastics. Let's see. Yeah, we're using 4 indicators, and there's our 4 indicators in the name there. Alright, how about if I just put a dash in between all these. Alright. Okay, so the money flow. We want it to be over or under 0. So we want to know if it's above or below 0. Alright, so let me go in here and... Oh, it doesn't actually have a... It doesn't have a line for the 0 line, so I'll use my drawing tool and just put a line on there so we can easily see that 0 line. And okay, so there's the 0 line for the money flow. Alright, so if we want to know if that's above or below 0, we'll just use the threshold. Right? So we're looking to see if it's above the 0 threshold or below the 0 threshold. And let's put this guy way up on top because I'm going to need 3 others below it. Alright. And so let's change the indicator over to the money flow, and let's see, we are using the 21 period, so we don't have to change anything there. Don't have to change the period, and there's only one plot, so we don't have to change the plot. Alright, so when it's above 0, we want a long output. Alright, so if we look at our chart, there we go. When it's above 0, alright, we're getting a long output. And now, if it's below 0, we want a short output. Like so. So keep in mind, so A is set to 0, right? So at A or greater, we want a long output. E is also set to 0. So for the short outputs, when we're at 0 or less, we want a short output like so. Alright, so that's indicator 1. And let's see, the MFI, we want to know if it's over or under the 50 line. So let me do the same thing here. I'll just drop a line on here around the 50. Okay, so now we can see our 50 line. And so once again, we're just going to use the threshold because we're looking to see if the indicator is above or below the 50 threshold. So let's set this up. And let me name this. So this is going to be the MFI. And I'll change the indicator over to the MFI. There we go, MFI, and that is also a 14 period, so we're just primarily using the default settings. Alright, so since we're using the 50 line as our threshold, let's set all of these to 50. And we're going to set all of our thresholds to 50. So now we want a long output when we're at 50 or greater. Alright, so if we look at the chart, we can see here, whenever the indicator is above 50, we're getting a long output. And if we're at 50 or less, right, we're going to want a short output here. Like so. There we go. Alright, next, let's look at the CCI. There you go. I'll make the lines a little thicker on the CCI. Alright, so on the CCI, right, the dashed lines, we can see the dashed lines are the 100 and negative 100. So let's open up BloodHound back up. So once again, we're looking at threshold levels. We want to know when we're above the 100 threshold or below the negative 100 threshold. So let's name this the CCI. Let's see, CCI, the positive 100 versus the negative 100. And let me grab a drink of water just a moment. Alright, there's our CCI. And I guess we're just using the default period here of 14. Alright, now let's set our threshold levels. So we'll set A to 100, and we're going to set E to negative 100. Right, and we need zeros in the middle. So just as a reminder, your threshold levels have to be in descending order. Right, they have to be in descending order. So that's why negative numbers always have to go in E or D to be in descending order. So, alright, so as the description says, when we're at 100 or greater, we're going to want an output from the long. And so look, as we look at this, right, let's interesting. So you see how the output is kind of has this analog kind of look to it. Let's stretch this out here. All right, so look, as the CCI approaches 100, the output also approaches 100. So we're kind of using the fuzzy logic part. Now, if we want to get rid of this analog type of get rid of this analog type of look, then the way we can do that is we can set B to 100, like so. So now you see we have a clean digital type of look, right? So so essentially we're kind of getting we got rid of the fuzzy logic and we have an absolute output when the indicator is above 100, just simply by putting two 100s in here. And I can do the same thing. I need to do the same thing with threshold D. Set it to negative 100. So that way we can see that it's mirrored around threshold C. And so when their CCI is below 100, we want a short output. So let's set at negative 100 or less to 1. Okay, and that tells us when the CCI is below 100. So there's that guy. And all right, next we have the MACD. So let's grab another threshold solver. Set this up for the MACD. Alright, I'm just going to use, let's see, I think we're using the default settings. Yeah. And we're just looking for the MACD to be above or below the 0 line. Alright, so all of our thresholds are set to the 0 line, like so. So, once again, just like the other ones, we're going to set our long side at A or greater, and we're going to set our short side at E or less. Turn that on, and so here's our MACD, like so, and oh, look, let's see, the settings on the chart are actually different. It's 8, 17, and 9, but the default is actually 12, 26, and 9. So let me change this back to 12, 26, and I'm going to set this as a default here. Basically override my previous default. Alright, so now we can see BloodHound matches that crossover point, right? So then we can see BloodHound's now matching what we see on the chart. So and yeah, there we go. I'll make the line a little thicker, like so. Alright, so we can see the MACD dips below that 0 line a couple of times here, and we're getting that short output. Alright, next one is our stochastics. Alright, I'm just kind of reading Andreas' notes here. So let's see. Alright. Okay, so Andreas, I guess when you're saying ST, you mean the stochastics. You want the fast crossing the slow. Alright. Alright, so if we're looking for the fast stochastics to cross the slow stochastics, then I need to turn on my %K, so I have it turned off right now. So let me turn it on. And I'll set it to a dash here. Okay, there we go. Alright, so our stochastics condition is it's going to be slightly different. So, because we're not actually comparing the stochastics against a level. We're not comparing the stochastics against a threshold level. We're actually comparing the two against each other. So we're comparing, one stochastic plot line, the fast line, to the stochastic slow line. So we're going to use a comparison solver in this situation. Alright, so we're going to be comparing the stochastics fast to the slow. So let's switch indicator A over to the fast stochastics. Grab our stochastics, and we're changing the settings here. We're going to use a 314 instead. And yeah, so the faster moving line is the D. All right, so we're going to select the D plot first for the faster one. And in indicator B down here, we're going to set this to the slower stochastic. So once again, let's change our periods to the 314, and now we're going to select the slower, the K. Okay, so as we look, right? So as we look at our indicator, right, we can see. Oh, looks like I got them backwards. Sorry. The dash line is the faster, so I got those backwards. So that's actually pretty easy to fix. So let me go back into indicator A in here, and I will just change the plot lines that I'm looking at. And go into indicator B here, into this stochastics, and change the plot lines that we're looking at. There we go. All right. So we can see when the dashed line, the faster one, is below the slower line, we're getting a short output because we're essentially kind of in a downward state on the stochastics. All right, yeah, so we have all 5 indicators now set up. We have all the conditions we're looking for all set up. So the next step is, I'm assuming we want all of these to be in agreement. All right, we want all of these to be in alignment. So let's just plug them all in to the AND node. And connect our AND node up. And there we go. All right, so the next thing we're going to, let's see, we want to look at the 2-minute and the 10-minute time frame. All right, so there we go. Shrink the chart up a little bit. Nope. All right, there's a 2-minute. And we can build a 10-minute real quick. So there's a 10-minute. All right. So let's take this one step further. Let's put the chart back on the 2-minute. Let's say we want the 2-minute and the 10-minute to be in agreement, right? So we don't want to take any of these 2-minute, kind of signals here, unless the 10-minute agrees with the 2-minute. So to do that, let me get the chart shrunk here. So if we want to check the 2-minute against the 10-minute chart, let's add a chart here. All right, so we can see we got a new chart down here. We'll set this to our 10-minute, like so. And then the next step is we need to take all the solvers that we made and copy them down onto the 10-minute. So we're going to hit the copy button, right? Move it down onto the 10-minute. So we can see I have an indicator on the 2-minute, a solver on the 2-minute, and I have a solver on the 10-minute. So let's copy this MFI and move it down onto the 10-minute. And I'll just repeat the process for all 5 solvers. Alright, so we can see I've got a copy of all the same solvers, same conditions, and now they're on the 10 minute. Right? So you notice, okay, so just take note that when I added this 10-minute chart, look at this notification I have up on my chart. It says, you know, press the F5 key to update BloodHound. So we have to get NinjaTrader to build this 10-minute chart. It won't build it on the fly. The only way we can get NinjaTrader to build that 10-minute chart is we need to hit F5 on our 2-minute chart here with BloodHound. Okay, so that 10-minute data is built, and so now I can go back into BloodHound and continue on here. So let's switch over to the Logic tab. Now all these solvers that I have on here, these guys are all operating on the 2-minute chart. Right? So whatever this chart is set to is what they're operating on. So our chart's a 2-minute chart. So all 5 of these solvers here are operating on the 2-minute chart. So next what we're going to do is under existing nodes, right, you'll notice we now have a 10-minute section here with all of our solvers from the 10-minute chart. So let's drop all these guys on here. So I'm just going to need to spray all these solvers out. Let's stretch this out a little bit. There we go. Okay, and now I just join them all together with an AND node. Alright. So now, when I'm on the 2-minute chart, if I want, I can see what's happening on the 10-minute chart here. Right? Scroll through and I can see what's happening on the 10-minute chart. Now, if I want to make sure that the 2-minute and the 10-minute are working with each other, let's see. How about if I just name this? I'll call it the the 10-minute. So now my AND node here tells me that these are all working on the 10-minute. So if I want to make sure that the 2-minute and the 10-minute are working together, or in alignment, or in agreement, I just use another AND node. There we go. I'll just make these look pretty here. And let's see if we get anything. Alright, let's scroll back. And yeah, so there we go. We still get some signals here going on. So alright, Andreas, I hope that did it for you. So good deal. So see, there was some other comments that came in here. Let me see if there are comments or questions. And oh, cool. Thanks, Bob. So Bob is letting us know that NinjaCators, who, by the way, NinjaCators, I'm actually working with them right now this week because they are becoming a full-fledged partner with us. So I'm working with NinjaCators to get some of their indicators working. They need to change some of the code around and expose some information out of their indicators. So they're going to have at least to start with, a handful of indicators that's going to be working with BloodHound. I guess you know, these ninja gators had to make a judgment call as to which indicators they think their customers, you know, most want to work with BloodHound. So we're starting with a handful right now. So pretty soon there'll be a partner here, but Bob is letting us know that Ninja Gators has a free candle pattern identifier, and it does work with BloodHound. Hey, thanks, Bob. I appreciate that. All right, so Ying's got a question, kind of a simple question about a crossover system. So he's saying, assuming I use an SMA crossover for an entry signal, and I want an exit signal when the SMA crosses over in the reverse direction, how would I set up the exit logic? Let's see. So let me build a quick crossover. Let me build a quick crossover logic here, and we'll just use the two moving averages that I already have on my chart here. Right, so I already have a solver there. There we go. There's our trigger lines crossover. So I already have this solver built. Okay, so let's expand the chart out a little bit, make this easier to see. So there we go. We can see a bunch of crossovers. All right, so if your system is really this simple, you don't really need to build an exit logic if you're wanting to go short. So, you know, so let me draw some arrows on here. So if this is, you know, your crossover signal to take a long trade, and then this is your crossover signal to take a short trade, but obviously if you're taking a short trade you need to exit your long trade. Well, you don't really need to exit that long trade. Raven will automatically reverse you into a short position, right? So you really don't need to build an exit logic if your trading system is this simple. However, if it is a little more complex, and you know, let's say you have a long crossover, but you know, there's also something else that has to happen before you take this long trade. You know, say like for example your MACD here. Your MACD has to be above the zero line before you actually take this long crossover, but you would want to exit on the first cross down. So to build an exit template, essentially it's just taking your crossover solver, and right, so I can take this crossover entry, and we'll call this a crossover entry, and let's make this, since I already have a solver built, let's throw that MACD on here. Where is the MACD? There we go. Here's our MACD condition. Right. All right. So let's adjust this here. So let's say your entry logic is not just a crossover, but you know, there's a little more complexity to it. So there we go. Okay, so we see, you know, that this would not be an entry short, right? The signal disappeared because of the MACD condition. But we want to exit here. All right, we want to exit on that. So all I need to do is I can take this logic template, I can copy it, and so I'll just call it my crossover exit now. And all I need is just the crossover solver, just by itself. All right, so this short signal coming out will exit this long position here. Right? But this long signal will not interfere with the long entry. So as so there's our entry, right? So we can see we have a long signal on the entry and a long signal on the exit. But this long signal on the exit's not going to exit your long position, right? So you don't have to worry about this long exit signal interfering with anything. So that's simply it there, Ying. It's that simple. All right, guys, everybody, have a good week.